Okay, today we're looking at the U.S. system of capitalism. In previous lessons, we've looked at capitalism as a theory and its major important parts. We've looked at the problems that come around when capitalism is unregulated, like it started being in the Industrial Revolution, the 1800s. And in this lesson, we're going to discuss the systems, the laws, the regulations in the United States, how the United States over the last 150 years, 200 years, has come about to regulate and tweak capitalism into the current system that we're using today. A couple notes. These programs and tweaks are continually ongoing. There's government legislation to change the rules. There's new interpretations in the court systems. So the system of government is continually changing. And the nature of consumers, technology, and the nature of businesses are continually changing too. And it changes fairly slowly. This leads me to a very interesting point. Whenever you're talking to someone who's much older, they are remembering a time of capitalism that was, for all intents and purposes, entirely different. So if someone is 45, 55, or 65, and they may be entirely unaware what the system is doing currently, because it's like inflation, that people's minds get stuck in the past, and prices rise so slowly that people don't internalize it and think it. Well, just as one example, big business has changed so slowly that the big businesses today are nothing like the big businesses of 30 years ago. Another example, the amount of pay that goes to the high administration of these big businesses is absolutely nothing like the amount of pay of CEOs and presidents of companies 40 years ago. So you're getting people oftentimes are stuck in where it was, and they don't necessarily understand where the system is today because the tweaks are continually ongoing. So be very careful about sometimes discussing certain things with some people, because double note right here. So number one, people may not understand the present because they're living in the past. And number two, while they're living in the past, people may have a distorted picture of the past. And it usually the past is seen as better, although sometimes the past is seen worse than it was. So oftentimes we can't really trust people's recollection of the past. Okay, another note, in my opinion, and this is just personal, I do not think economics is a science, and I do not believe the scientific method is used enough to figure out changes and tweaks to the system. And I don't think the scientific method is used enough to evaluate if those changes work. I think because the changes have to go through the political process, I think it has become incredibly political. So I think the scientific method has taken a back seat. And so we get a lot of tweaks, and we're not evaluating if our changes are working, and we're not thinking about it and doing our research before we institute a change. That's my own personal opinion. I would like to see more scientific method when we mess with and try to tweak the economic system. And finally, currently the system has been stable-ish for the last few decades. It goes along. Standard of living is rising. There's been crashes and people get through them. As a nation, not individually, there's a difference between individual stability and national stability. As a nation, it has been a series of decades of prosperity, and the system has been stable-ish. I do have another note. Apparently there are a lot of notes for this lesson. Almost all the interventions in capitalism come at a cost of efficiency, okay? We have made these interventions over the last couple hundred years in the United States because we thought the benefit to people, the benefit to the environment, the benefit to the system was more important than efficiency, innovation, and low-cost goods, because that's what unregulated capitalism does. The most innovation, the cheapest goods, okay? But it comes at a cost. Now, if we were to slow down our innovation, if we were to slow down capitalism, it's probably not a problem in the U.S. right now, because when you look at it, life is pretty good already. The standard of living is pretty good. The life expectancy, the amount of stuff we quote-unquote have, it's better than it's ever been for individuals, the standard of living. So if we slowed down and took a break and put in more rules, it probably wouldn't really hurt the average person. But there's one thing to think about. We're not alone in our country. We are with other country and with billions of other people. And there are billions of people in the world right now who are not in the United States that are ready to do unregulated capitalism to advance their lives and their countries. Okay, so right now the United States is the world economic power, kind of along with China. And if the United States slows down a lot because we regulate capitalism to feel better, where would that put the U.S.? Because we would slow down, but quite frankly, India and China would not slow down. They would keep going with unregulated capitalism. And yeah, it would hurt their workers. There's a lot of negatives that we don't want in the United States, but other countries tend to willing to do that to get ahead. Where would that put the United States? Would it crash us? Probably not. Would we look more like Europe? Europe did this a couple decades ago where they slowed down, put more regulations, and they're arguably not as productive as the United States because of the slowing capitalism. So where would that put the United States if we slowed down and took care of our peoples more, took care of our environment more? For us, it would probably be okay in the short term, but in the long term, will other countries take over, and what would that even mean? Okay, time to go through a quick list of some of the things that the United States does to regulate the capitalism. And most of this comes from we and Great Britain didn't like what was happening in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution or the early 1900s. And so regulations were put into capitalism to stop certain things and certain negative externalities from happening. Okay. Workers' rights in the United States. Currently, we're running on a 40-hour work week with overtime. If someone works more than 40 hours at their job, they get time and a half, 1.5 times their hourly rate. But this is only for hourly workers. If you have a salary, there are different rules and regulations for that. But for a vast majority of workers who work hourly, it's pretty much limited to 40 hours. And that would be 5 days of 8 hours, given some time, and then people can do overtime if they wish. We've outlawed child labor. Children are not allowed to work, okay? And then they're eased into it. Right before they're adults, they can work a certain amount of time while going to school. And then when they're adults, they can work full adult schedules. And this is except for family businesses. Family businesses children can help with their family businesses. It's not considered illegal child labor unless it violates certain other laws. It is illegal to hire non-citizens unless they are approved by the government, okay? And this is done to prevent too many workers. If there are too many workers, it drives wages low. And if it's illegal workers, well, they're not even going to get covered under the minimum wage, so they're going to be paid even less than the minimum wage. And this is a law to protect not only the workers, but to protect the delicate balance of geopolitics and supply and demand. We're running with anti-discrimination and anti-harassment laws. The EEOC, we learned about in previous lessons, tries to prevent the major harassment and discrimination based upon protected classes. We have, I believe it's OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health. We can find out exactly what that means, but it's basically federal and state workplace safety rules, okay? They have to be safe working conditions. And if they're not safe working conditions, employees can sue, the federal government can sue. It's just workers have to be safe. Even though it's cheaper not to have safety issues, they have to be safe. See, we're giving up free capitalism, the free market. Goods are more expensive because workplaces are safe, but we decided we want safe working places. We have workers' compensations. If workers are injured on the job, they get their medical paid for. It's not insurance, it's workers' compensation if injured. I guess it is a form of insurance. And we have, many states have different laws, okay, but these are on federal laws that encompass the whole United States. We have a Family Medical and Leave Act. For certain reasons, employees can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to deal with medical issues, family issues, pregnancy issues. And this is per year. So when things happen, the workers have job protection. It isn't paid, but their job is protected so they can come back. And all of these would fix the old practice of you're injured, you're fired, you're done. You're pregnant, you're fired, you're done. So now you got to go and tend to your sick parents or your sick children. You're fired. You're done. Okay, so now workers have certain protections. Okay, so the first category that capitalism was bad at providing was workers' rights, workers' protection, workers' quality of life. The next thing capitalism is bad at providing is universal goods. Capitalism is great at providing the most efficient goods and services for the vast majority of people, but there's always a level of people in capitalism that don't have enough money to afford adequate levels of a good. And so in the US, we've decided that certain things should be had by everybody, regardless of competence, regardless of status, regardless of money. Okay. For example, a free public education for children K through 12. If left up to capitalism, okay, most people would get great education, but there'd be a level of child that isn't getting the education, whether it be because of life circumstance, the child circumstance, or the money of the family. So free public education is provided by the government. Now, this is not to say that there's not private opportunities. Okay, and we see that with colleges, public colleges, private colleges, public elementary K through 12, private K through 12. But the public option is there for everybody. We see it in retirement. We say that everybody should have some sort of retirement and not die. And so the system is set up that everyone can retire, almost everybody, and not die. We have what's called Social Security. That is, if you work with a paying job for a certain number of years, you get a certain amount of money when retiring. And that amount for Social Security is literally survival wages, okay? But that was the goal, that everyone gets to retire and survive. Whether they like their retirement or not, and whether they're happy in it, that's more up to the actual individual with their own private retirement. The government provides basically enough to survive. The government also provides retirement accounts, not the money. They say that retirement accounts have tax breaks. So the government gives you the ability to grow your own money without taxing it. That's huge. That's really big because the government wants people to take care of their own retirement along with the government retirement. Government jobs have pensions, which basically a government job pays you in retirement. And in retirement, the U.S. wants health care for all, period. And that's why there's government health care for all when people are retired. It's called Medicare. Now, this is basically forced savings, okay? Someone could do it all on their own if they saved every single year of their working year. Social Security, whenever you work, money comes out of your paycheck. Retirement accounts, money, you put your money in every single year. Government pensions from government jobs, they take money out of your paycheck every single year you work. Medicare, every single year you get a paycheck, every single paycheck, they take money out for it. So it's basically the government funding this free stuff by taking your money while you work, okay? So the government says capitalism won't do it because people won't save on their own. And so the government forces them to save by making government programs. Okay, and then we have public items that are just free to the public, paid for by taxes. Libraries, broadcast TV is free, parks. There are things that cities and the federal government thinks that every single person should have. Radio, broadcast, they think everyone should have it. It's free, and it's paid for by various means, including taxes, including ad revenue, and such like that. It's another great example of if you want the best of the best of the best, you're going to want to pay for your cable and pay for other channels, like your sports channel or your learning channel. But everyone gets the basic TV. You want the best parts? You want amusement parks? You're going to pay for it. Capitalism. You want just some green areas? You get a free park. The minimum wage is something the country established, I believe in the 1930s. It's a very hot button issue on whether it causes more problems than it stops. Is there a different way to take care of things other than a minimum wage? It's a pretty, I don't want to say new, but it's a controversial, and it's very political. And as such, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of propagandizing. It's a very complex issue. If anyone describes that there should or shouldn't, or where the minimum wage should be with only one or two sentences, you absolutely know they're either lying to you or they're misinformed. It is such a complex and deep issue. For every one argument, there's another argument. The only way to find out the minimum wage is to tweak it, to study it, and really, this is where it comes into play, the scientific method versus what people want to do politically. Let's just say for the minimum wage, historically, it was supposed to be a living wage with purchasing power, so even the lowest paid worker could have a living wage with purchasing power. That's what it was supposed to be. Historically, it has been a survival wage. And even today, in almost every area, two people working 50 hours a week on minimum wage can survive. They would not comfortably, and they would have to give up things, but it is a survival wage. It has many factors, it has many positives, it has many negatives. It is a lesson unto itself. I just wanted to put it out there that it is something that's been around, and it is a tweak into the capitalist system. Let's take a second to put something that doesn't really belong anywhere else. Most of these tweaks to capitalism, since it started with unregulated business, since it started with no rules, almost all of these tweaks seem like they're going against businesses. Well, to some degree they are. They're making businesses less profitable, less efficient, okay? Because they started from ultimate efficiency with all the factors in the realm of businesses, okay? So here's a miscellaneous one that's actually where businesses have a lot of power recently, a couple tweaks. Number one, corporations a few years ago have been legally defined by the Supreme Court as people. So businesses are people with human rights and legal rights, and businesses can go to court, and businesses have religious rights under certain circumstances. So, and what's most important is businesses, because they're people, they have the right, the actual business has the right to donate and lobby government. And as businesses grow and get more wealthy, this becomes more and more of a problem because they can spend a lot of money in the courts and they spend a lot of money with politics. So the corporations are highly influential people. They influence politics and laws. They influence laws that affect them. And they do it with millions of dollars in donations to political people. It's not bribery. It's influence buying, which is legal. Okay, there are many social safety nets. A lot of these are called entitlements. Oh, that's going to be a good definition. Okay, an entitlement is any government assistance program that one needs to qualify for. And this could be for supplemental nutrition, a SNAP used to be called food stamps, Social Security, government retirement, anything the government provides that one qualifies for is called an entitlement program. Okay, so some people fall outside of the capitalist system. Okay, this would be for people who are working, but they're not getting a living wage enough to support the number of people in their households. This would be people who can't work. Okay, so just going through a few. There's housing assistance. A lot of times, some of these programs are universal and immediate. Some of them take a while to get into. There's housing assistance. Takes a while to get into, but once you're into it, the program, you can stay in the program. It pays money towards housing, government housing in some places. The food assistance, supplemental nutrition, we can look up exactly what that is. Used to be food stamps. So if you're under a certain amount of income, you could get food assistance to buy food. Training and education programs. Usually all of these are for lower income. You definitely below the poverty threshold, but sometimes even if you make more than the poverty threshold, you qualify for these, and sometimes on a sliding scale. Some training and education programs are totally free because the idea is people want to get into a good paying job, and the government wants you to get into a good paying job. Grants for colleges. Sometimes public colleges in some states are almost totally free, the tuition. And if someone doesn't have a lot of money, their family can get onto Medicaid. Okay, Medicare is to take care of the elderly. Medicaid is to aid those who need assistance. And there's, I believe in every state, child health insurance too. And there's even if you are totally disabled and can't work. Okay, so you can't work, you could go on government disability. And so people who aren't reaching a minimum standard by participating or can't participate in the capitalism can then gets a safety net. It's also called a safety net from the government. Okay, capitalism, unless you are one of very select workers and there's not a lot of supply of your workers and high demand, capitalism puts the businesses on an unequal playing field than the workers. The workers don't have a lot of power. The businesses have tendency to be more powerful. And one of the ways that the workers came up with to balance this is unions. Unions were first seen as illegal because they really do limit the power of businesses and capitalism. It really slows down the capitalism. So at first unions were governmentally illegal, but then they were made legal, and they are an incredibly powerful tool for workers to come together. Now there are some, well, let's go over the positives first. Unions have collective bargaining. They really come to the table and they talk to the business and then negotiate with the business for the things the workers want, whether it's more time off, whether it's more pay, whether it's better conditions. And the power of the unions is that the workers can come together and strike. And technically, if the business isn't too big, the workers have the power to make the business go bankrupt by not working. And but if the business is really big, the strike isn't as effective, but still unions are still very, very powerful. Mostly now we only see unions in government jobs, the public sector, for better or for worse. Now unions do have some big negatives. Number one, they really do slow down capitalism quite a bit. Number two, unions stop the most competent workers from getting the most money they can because usually it's all salaries are negotiated. And so if you're an absolutely great worker, you might get not as much money as you potentially could. Unions they are formed like a government, okay, with presidents and secretaries and voting. And anytime you make a government system, which involves union dues and money, you get corruption and you get conflicting ideas and you get conflicting desires. So there is union corruption. And it does remove the individuality of the worker. So those are all some negatives. You'll have to decide if you think unions are good or bad. And by good or bad, I mean positive or negative, good for you, negative for you, and in what circumstances would unions be good, what circumstances might unions be harmful. It's a cost-benefit analysis. Okay, how did living conditions get better from the filthy, crowded, awful, disease-infested living conditions of the Industrial Revolution? Well, basically, government got caught up. Government doesn't want cities living in filth with a lot of crime, okay? The literal definition of government from the earliest civilizations is to run the cities and keep the cities running. So government finally gets involved and creates building codes and city codes, okay? The government produces the infrastructure such as sewer and clean water and garbage removal in a lot of places. So basically government does what business never should do, which is run a city. Government makes the city safe and runs well with public works and then lets businesses make the money. And the government, so building and city codes, and then the government also produces a lot of landlord laws. So if one doesn't own their own apartment or house, the landlording is a business and there's a lot of rules and regulations that landlords have to follow. So the cities, the government basically took care of those cities. So for the environmental pollution, which was a really big one because capitalism does not have the mechanisms to solve environmental problems because it's cheaper and more efficient to pollute the environment, extinct animals, and use all the resources. So capitalism is designed to destroy the environment. Basically just government regulations. The Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. plus state laws plus other federal laws basically say the things you can and cannot do, the pollution you can or cannot do. If go after a business if they pollute illegally, even if they pollute legally, but later it's decided it's too bad, they have to pay to clean it up. It's basically we set standards to make sure the environment doesn't get destroyed. Okay, well, one of the reasons capitalism absolutely works is competition. Competition with businesses. When there's no competition, the businesses raise the price. If they have a monopoly, they raise the price, and the good never gets any better, okay? And so that's why capitalism works so well, competition. So the government law says there is a way businesses can break that by becoming monopolies. Then there's no competition. So the law is very, very simple. You cannot be a monopoly. And if you're too big and you have a monopoly, you will be broken up. And so smaller businesses will compete. Yes, now I know there are some rules, like if you invent something, you're the only one that can sell that invention for a certain amount of years. Yes, I get it. But those are very specific exceptions to the anti-monopoly laws, the antitrust laws. Remember, they need competition, innovation, and to keep the cost down. Businesses also cannot put other businesses out of business by doing shady stuff. They can't use their incredibly large money to put littler businesses out by like selling below cost. And there's plenty of ways businesses can really try to make the other businesses go out of business. You got to play fair. And finally, businesses can't come together and pretend to be a monopoly. Two gas stations can't agree to fix their prices. This would be anti-collusion laws. No business can go and say, hey, let's all raise our prices, or let's all reduce the supply of something so the prices go up. That's illegal too. They got to keep free and open competition innovation. And this is so serious. The government takes on the biggest. Microsoft was taken on, boom, they got hit. Facebook was taken on, and they're being hit. Why? Because the government's saying you're becoming a monopoly, and that can't happen. Now, a lot of these are laws and regulations and ideas are supported by a very strong court system, not a criminal court system, although some business crimes and capitalist crimes are criminal, and you could go to jail if you do something wrong and it hurts somebody. Other times they're just civil, which means you have to pay money. So our court system is set up so people can sue for damages. So if businesses hurt people, then the people can sue the businesses and get paid for their loss. But it goes farther than that. Not only can people get how they're hurt, money for their damages, but the courts could instill money as punishment to keep the businesses from doing it again, to send a warning as a deterrent. So sometimes you'll see like someone gets $60,000 for the actual medical bills that they need, and then they get another like $500,000 for pain and suffering, because we want to make it clear that if the businesses do something wrong and they hurt people, they're going to financially suffer. And the only thing a business cares about is the money. So it's very strong legal cases. And we have this idea that and businesses can sue other businesses if businesses break the law. And the governments can sue businesses if businesses break the law. And we have something called a class action. So sometimes thousands of people who are hurt can come in one court case, so they don't have to hire thousands of lawyers. Thousands of people who were impacted can sue in one case and get a huge judgment against the businesses. Usually, it doesn't give a lot of money to the actual plaintiffs because half of it goes to lawyers' fees, etc., but it does really hit the business, and it's a deterrent, and it makes sure they don't do it again. Another thing that's kind of wrong with capitalism that happens is it goes in cycles. For whatever reason, capitalism will get out of control, and then a whole sector of the market will bust. It's called a boom and bust cycle. So things are growing, things are doing well, and then boom, something happens, and the whole system starts spiraling down. These are called depressions and recessions. Capitalism is very, very bad at fixing depressions. What capitalism wants to do is wait till all the workers starve, and then they'll be hired back, and it's not capitalism. It needs a reset button. It gets in a death spiral, as seen in the Great Depression, as seen in other recessions. Now, we could let it run its course, but that causes more pain than people want. So what happens is for normal individual business cycles, when families go through a cycle and maybe get fired or laid off every however many years, we have unemployment insurance. Okay, that takes care of individual families. But when the nation is spiraling down because of a bust, the government does stimulus. The government puts money, it borrows money and puts money into the economy, and the Federal Reserve, the national banks, up the money supply. They get money flowing. Money is gas for an economy. So when the economy crashes, the government gasses the economy, and within a few years, we get back to normal. And how often do these happen? Every 10 years, anywhere from 7 years to 15 years. There we go. So finally, how are we supposed to be dealing with class tensions? In capitalism, there's got to be rich, upper middle class, working, and those living under poverty. Well, how do we deal with people being upset that there's classes, feeling frustrated, sometimes jealousy, and a lot of it is to set up a system that seems fair. Humans are designed to see fairness, to not like unfairness. And if things seem logical and fair, they seem okay. So we got to make sure that the class system has at its base fair, equal, and the possibility of improvement. If you have those three things, history has shown that the people are very fine if they're middle class and not rich. People are even fine if they're working class and they know the system is fair. They know the system could improve their own lives or their children's lives. And and if they know that things are getting better every generation. So here's what we got. We got programs for equitable education, trying to make that every child has an education, and differing amounts of money are spent on different children to get them what they need to give them the best start in life. We see the ability to move up within one generation. So we see in the hopes are that the system, if you make correct choices and work hard, you can move up one step. And people seem to think that's fair and maybe move up more if there's luck. But in one generation, your life, people need to believe that if you work hard and make the right choices and sacrifice, you can move up a step. And if one cannot, there has to be the belief that if one's family works hard, makes the right choices, makes sacrifices, the next generation, if they do the same, could be a class up. That would be mobility between the generations. Those two seem to offer hope. And so you could live your whole life middle class being like, I'm going to retire maybe a little richer. Or even if I don't retire, even if I'm middle class all my life, my children have the chance of being richer if they work hard, make good choices, and sacrifice. And that seems to make a lot of people okay with the class system. And part of that is because we have an ever-increasing standard of living. It's better today for the middle class than it was 20 years ago. Okay? So people see that technology is increasing. People see that they have more stuff. They're living longer. They're more comfortable. So people see that the standard of living is increasing. Now, I leave it to people. I leave it to you. I leave it to many other people to argue and examine, and please argue with facts, and please examine for hours and hours. I leave it to you to decide whether the class system in the U.S. is achieving those goals that I just laid out. All right, and that is a straightforward overview of capitalism, the United States tweaks, and current system. All right, thanks for watching.